I led them with cords of kindness, with the bands of love. And I became to them as one who eases the yoke on their jaws, and I bent down to them and fed them.
Shalom, shalom, folks. It's Brother Tender from Something to Chew On coming in. Gonna do a read-along video for you. But I want to start by asking a question. Was Yeshua a Pharisee? Chew on that, and I'm gonna get to the read-along, and then I'll attempt to answer that question from the way I understand it. Okay? Okay, here we go. Read-along update. The winner last week was the 2nd Chronicles, and I went ahead and did all those. And like I said, I probably was going to do those because it was one of the longer books. I did it in sections, and I uploaded it in sections. I uploaded it, I want to say it was like the first 20 chapters on Wednesday, and then the rest of it on Thursday. Either way, 2nd Chronicles playlist finished. It's all on YouTube, and as usual, the link will be in the description of this video below. Okay, the vote last week was between the book of Job and 2nd Corinthians, and 2nd Corinthians won. It was a close vote on that one. I'll go ahead and say I've already got all the videos for 2nd Corinthians made. I sat down yesterday, compared to all the Old Testament books, the books in the New Testament are fairly short, and the chapters themselves are fairly short. So it didn't take me any time. I sat down and I went ahead and made all the videos. I haven't uploaded them yet. I'll do that sometime in the coming week. Most high willing, I'll get all that done. Most likely Wednesday. That's the day that I've in my schedule. That's the day I've been uploading videos, so most likely I'll do it then. I may do it sooner, though. Just depends. Okay, there's not going to be a vote this week. I sat down and I thought about it, and I've got a list right here. It's a list of all the books of the Bible, both the Tanakh, the Old Testament, and the Brit Hadashah, New Testament. And as I've been making these things, I've just been, basically checking them off the list. And I would sit down each week and look at it and try to find 2 books to vote on. Well, this week, the only thing, I had somebody ask me the other day, let me back up for a second. I had somebody ask me the other day, they said, how much have you done of it already? And I told them, I said, I pretty much got it almost all done. I said, I'm on the backside, the downhill slope, however you want to label, whatever colloquialism you want to use. But in the Old Testament, like I've said in the past couple of videos, I've got pretty much the entire Old Testament done. The only one that's not done, or let me rephrase that. The only book of the Old Testament that is of any length that I haven't done is the book of Job. It's got, 42 chapters, I think it is. Is that what it is? Is it 42 or 46? I think it's 42. Here, let me look real quick, and I'll tell you. Yeah, 42 chapters in the book of Job. And the other ones from the Old Testament that I haven't done are the minor prophets. Not all of them. I've done some of them, but the ones that I haven't done are the short ones that got like 3 and 4 chapters apiece, right? And then in the New Testament, I've done the Gospels and Book of Acts and Hebrews and Revelation. And Romans, I've already done that one. And 1st and 2nd Corinthians, those are all the long ones, if you can even consider them long compared to the books of the Old Testament. But it's basically the epistles, whether that be the Pauline epistles or just the epistles in general. That's the ones I haven't done in the New Testament. And they're all fairly short. 2, 3, 4 chapters or what have you. So basically what I'm going to do this week, instead of putting a vote out there, I'm going to go ahead and do Job. Get that long book out of the way and go ahead and get it uploaded. And I sat down the other day and I did, 4, 5, 6, 7 chapters. I started the process. I went ahead and got the computer set up, and got everything set up in order to work on Job. And I started. I had a little bit of free time, so I went ahead and did, like I said, the first 5, 6, 7 books. I don't remember exactly how many it was, but I've got it set up to do. So basically this week, there's not going to be a vote. I'm going to just go ahead and do the book of Job, and I'll get it uploaded. Makes sense. And then next week, once I get that long book out of the way, next week, I'll start the voting again. And it'll be, between relatively short books, because that's pretty much all we have left. So most likely what I'll do is choose one book from the epistles of the Brit Hadashah, New Testament, or one of the minor prophets, and let you vote between those. And then we'll just go from there until we get the rest of them finished. Okay, now, with all that said, let me put this back over here, my little checklist, put it back over here so I don't misplace it. I get it in there. Okay. All right, let's say that. 2 Chronicles made, they're all uploaded. 2 Corinthians, all videos are made. Just got to get them uploaded to the YouTube. And then I'll work on Job this week. Okay, now, to this question. Was Yeshua a Pharisee? I'm not going to be long. This is one of these things. Let's see. I'll start this way. For those who know me, I haven't made a lot of videos on this type of material, delving into the Talmud or the oral law and things like that. But for those who know me, you know that this is stuff I read. Now, I'm not saying I agree with it by any means. Don't take me the wrong way. It's simply in order to better understand the Gospels, because you will see Yeshua and the Pharisees get into it, argue about this, and blah, 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 blah. And a lot of it is it's oral law, what's known as the oral law or the Talmud. I've said this before. Once you understand that there are two laws, a written law and the oral law. Written law being given by the Most High to Moses at Mount Sinai, written down what we're supposed to follow. Then you have what's known as the oral law. In the New Testament, it's referred to as the tradition of men, tradition of elders, commandments of men. Paul refers to it in Galatians 1:14 as the tradition of my fathers, meaning his Pharisaic fathers, right? But it's the oral law. It's what's at the time of Yeshua in the first century, it wasn't codified, it wasn't written down. But it has since become, that it's been since been codified, actually written down. And it comes to us today as what's known as the Talmud. The Mishnah and the Gemara and all this. It's Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud. Well, they had the Jerusalem Talmud also. But I do look into these things. I read a lot of books. And, in order to understand, like I've said, in order to understand this, you have to put yourself in the first century culture. Context. It's context, not just the words on the page. It's the cultural context, the historical context. So when you better understand their culture of that day, you can better understand, the writings of the New Testament. And a lot of times there's things in there that deal with this oral law. And sadly, a lot of people in quote-unquote mainstream Christianity, they don't even realize the existence of the oral law. And therein lies a lot of confusion. I've said this and I've said this and I've said this before. When you understand that, the written and the oral law, the dichotomy, that there are two laws, and you allow that, you take into consideration that variable when you sit down and read the Gospels, or the New Testament, the Gospels, and especially Paul's writing, things start to make a lot more sense. Because often Paul, he will say law. He uses the Greek word nomos, which gets translated into our English as law. Well, sometimes he's referring to the written law of the Most High, and sometimes he's referring to the oral law, man-made stuff of the Pharisees. But he doesn't signify which one he's talking about. And therein lies a lot of the confusion. Does that make sense? Like I said, a lot of people don't even realize this oral law exists. And therefore, they don't have that variable to plug into the equation of interpretation. And it leads to all kind of confusion. Well, it's the same thing in the Gospels. You see it. Okay, you have a lot of people who wrongly think that the reason Yeshua and the Pharisees got into it was because the Pharisees were following the law. And in their minds, they think, oh, that's the law of Moses, the law of God, the Torah. No, that was the oral law they were following. That's the whole thing. Does that make sense? Anyway, as a little background, I kind of got off on a tangent. But the past, I'll say this, the past, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 months, I read a lot. Like I said, I started off saying I read a lot of stuff. I've read a couple of books, and I've read a couple of like blogs on the internet, and I watched some videos and stuff, and this idea keeps coming up. And that Jesus was actually a Pharisee. And I'm like, that just doesn't fit right. That irks my spirit, if I can say it that way. It just doesn't. No, I don't think he was a Pharisee. And I've been digging into this, trying to come to a definite conclusion on this matter. Other than the fact, let's state it this way. I'm gonna give you I'll give you some information, and you can decide for yourself. But I'm gonna give you what I believe. First off, I'm going to tell you, I do not think Jesus was a quote unquote Pharisee. I just don't see it. First off, if you read the Gospels in their entirety and the context of it, you see that he was against. It wasn't. How do I label this? It wasn't so much the Pharisees themselves that he was against. It was against their teaching and their interpretation, their ideology, if you will. Makes sense? Okay. You read through, and he always gets into it with the Pharisees. That's, there's always the tension between him and the Pharisees. And it wasn't them as people, it was their teachings. Like it says in Matthew 16, he says, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees. And he was talking about their doctrine, their teaching, what they taught, their ideological, what they believed. Do you see what I'm saying? That's what he was against. Okay? Okay, now, and I've read a lot of stuff since coming across this idea. Like I said, I've read quite a few books, and people, they've spent entire chapters, multiple chapters, trying to justify this idea that Yeshua was a Pharisee. Now, I'm not going to speak to the motives of why they're trying to prove that. I'll leave that to, any of you who actually come across one of these books and somebody presents that idea. I'll let you discern the reason why they're trying to say that Yeshua was a Pharisee. But I see certain video teachings and, just all this stuff, and I see this idea come up, and no. So, I don't know, the past month or so, I've just kind of been looking into this, trying to find a definitive answer to this question. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to just make a video about this and put this information out there and let the viewer, y'all comment below. What do y'all think? Do you think he was a Pharisee or not? Comment below and let me know what you think. You got some links to to back up what you say? Share them. I would definitely love to read this because, like I said, the past month or so, I've been going down some rabbit holes and some rabbi holes, if you know what I'm talking about, looking into this. And a lot of these people, I'll start by saying this. A lot of the people that say he was a Pharisee, they have different reasons of why they say that. One reason that I keep coming across is because because Yeshua was called rabbi. Therefore, he was a Pharisee. And I'm like, okay, I see why you're saying that. But once you look at I've looked at the word rabbi being used throughout the New Testament. And let's see if I can explain this. I'll let y'all go look all this up. I'll let y'all go look this information up. You see the word in the Greek that's translated into the English as rabbi. Sometimes it's translated as rabbi, and sometimes it's translated as master. But it's the same Greek word. Okay, now, on the other end of the spectrum, you have another Greek word that's used to refer to Yeshua, and it's translated as master also. So it's two Greek words. One's translated as rabbi and master, one's translated as master. Okay? But this word is translated as rabbi. When you sit down and you look at it, and I've read definitions here and there and all over. I've looked at the Strong's Concordance, all kind of lexicons. I've went to, all these various websites just to see about that word rabbi. And I literally went down a rabbi hole looking for the definition of that word. But general consensus is that in the first century, that term rabbi was used in both a formal and informal sense of the word. Meaning, you would refer to someone as a rabbi who was actually a Pharisaical rabbi. But it was also used in a more loose definition of the word, just as a term of respect for a teacher or a quote-unquote master. And you would say, rabbi. Does that make sense? And a lot of these places that I've looked, they basically said the word, they basically, what they're saying is that the word we use today in a formal sense referring to a rabbi, that's not the same word, or it's not the same word. It didn't have the same meaning it did in the first century. They said the formal use of the word to refer to someone who has had the training of one of the two schools of Jewish thought, Hillel or Shammai. And rabbi, as we use it today, that use of the word in that sense didn't come into use until after 70 AD, when the sacking of the temple in Jerusalem. And then when the Pharisees, the party of the Pharisees became the ruling authority, so to speak. That's when the term rabbi came to mean what it does to us today. But in the first century, it could be used that way, but it could also be used in a more informal sense of the word, just as a term of respect. Does that make sense? So, in the sense that Yeshua was a teacher, among other things, his disciples called him rabbi. Right? So you can't really use, in my mind, you can't really use the fact that they called him a rabbi as a reason for him being a Pharisee. But a lot of people, that's some of the strong evidence people want to use. That kind of gets thrown out the window. Okay, the next thing they use, now this one's kind of, I won't go too deep into this. This is where the Talmud and stuff comes in. But I've seen a lot of people will use this reason. And they'll say that Yeshua's teaching style And some of the things he taught were of a Pharisaical nature. They were flavored with Phariseeism. In fact, I'm not sure how to exactly explain this. And they'll point to things that Yeshua taught, and they'll say, well, that's very similar to what's over here in the Talmud. Okay? Or like his teaching method, the way he taught, it was similar to what the Pharisees did. Okay? I'm like, okay, I get you. I see what you're saying. And I understand where you're coming from, but I can't agree with that. Now I'll explain to you why. Think about it. Just think about it for a second. At the time of Yeshua, the Talmud, like I said in the beginning, was not codified, meaning it wasn't written down. It wasn't written down, depending on what source you go to and who it is. But basically, we're going to go with, in like the 3rd or 4th century BC, or AD, after the cross. 300-400 years is when it was written down. Like I said, sources vary on that information. But it was after the time of Messiah when all this oral traditions, oral law, all this stuff was actually written down and codified in what today we know as the Talmud. So, to try to say that Yeshua was teaching from that, well, the stuff wasn't written down. So, did he get information from the Talmud, or did the Talmud get information from him? I don't know. I don't know. It doesn't matter, though, because if you know who he is, wouldn't you think he would have knowledge of all this anyway? You see what I'm saying? And this is the same book, and I'll say this too. I'm going to just throw this one out there, and I hope this don't come across the wrong way. But one of these sources, they point to where in the Talmud that it says that Yeshua was a student of this certain rabbi. As in, he was being formally taught. That's what I'm going with that. It says in there that Yeshua, it says Jesus of Nazareth. That's the way they refer to him in the Talmud, in this section of the Talmud, was a student of this person. Okay? But then that same section goes on to call Yeshua a sorcerer, an idolater, and that he led Israel astray. And then it goes on to say this, and this is what I thought just blew my mind. It doesn't only proclaim Yeshua to be an unrepentant sinner. The way it's written in the Talmud, it's making Yeshua a self-proclaimed unrepentant sinner. So, that's just some basic information. You can go read this. I'll tell you where it's at. It's in the Talmud in the Sanhedrin 107b, starting at section 12. You can read it from down there. I'm going to show you all this on the screen. I don't want to promote all this, but you can go read it. But the simple fact that we know all this is tradition of the elders, tradition of the fathers, Pharisee oral law. And it calls Yeshua a sorcerer, an idolater, two of the worst things in Judaism to be labeled as, and led Israel astray. It's amazing that in the places where it mentions Yeshua, they paint him in the worst light they can. But yet this is the quote-unquote authority to say that Yeshua was a Pharisee because he learned from some rabbi. And ultimately, here's the ultimate thing. The rabbi that they say he sat under and learned from lived in the 2nd century BC, which is over 100 years before Yeshua walked the earth. So again, how much credit do you give to those writings? no matter what they say in them, the person he was supposed to be a student of lived 200 years before he walked the earth. So it's historically impossible. So to use that as a source to say that Yeshua was a Pharisee, nah, I can't get with that one either, because like I said, 200-year time difference. It just doesn't work. It's impossible. Makes sense. Okay. So, all these reasons they give, they just, when I was sitting reading one of these books, specifically one of these books, I'm not going to mention what book it was and who published it and who wrote it or nothing like that, but I kept reading it, and on the surface, it's a very convincing argument. It is, and I started going, this can't be right, and that's when I started digging into it. And it's like all the reasons these people give for him being a Pharisee, once you do a little bit of digging and have a little bit of discernment, these reasons start falling off, and they hold no water, if that makes any sense. Okay? Now, with all that said, let's simply go to the text itself, the biblical text itself, and see what it says about Yeshua being or not being a Pharisee. Okay? Now, let me just bring this up. I'm gonna make this quick. I know I've been kind of rambling, but I'm just giving you some background information. But let's go to the text and see what it says. If we go to, wait a minute, that's not right. Let me bring this back up. Hang on a second. I had it brought up already. Okay, we're going to go to John chapter 7. I'm going to start at the beginning of the chapter. Now, I'm not going to read all this. John chapter 7 is a very long chapter. I'm simply going to point out some things just so you kind of get the context of this chapter. But by all means, please go back and read the whole chapter. As always, I encourage you, go back and read the chapter. But I'm going to read this out of the King James. I'm going to start reading it out of the King James. I just want you to see something. I'm going to just point this out. Okay, John chapter 7 from the King James. Let's transition over. Right here, follow the mouse. It says, after these things, Yeshua walked in Galilee, for he would not walk in Jewry, because the Jews sought to kill him. Let's look at that same verse in the English Standard Version, another popular English rendering of the text. It says, after this, Yeshua walked about in Galilee. He would not go about in Judea, because the Jews were seeking to kill him. You see the difference? Judea, Jewry. Let's look at the scripture 2009. For he did not wish to walk in Yehuda or Judea. Anyway, back to the King James. Did we catch that? I'm not going to go into explaining any of that, but King James says Jewry, and the other one's translated as Judea. It's a Greek word, idubia. We'll just leave it at that. Jewry. And people call the King James a perfect translation. Anyway. Like I said, I just point out this verse because it says the Jews sought to kill him, meaning to kill Messiah. Now I'm going to go down what it is here. I'll give you the context because I'm not going to read all this. I'll just give you the context. It's the Feast of Tabernacles. And his brothers are trying to get him to go up to Jerusalem, to the Feast of Tabernacles. He says he's not going to go, but then he does go. But he goes and nobody knows he's going. Why? Because the Jews want to kill him. Now, when we say Jews, I'll go ahead and say this. You read the book of John, most often when it uses that word Jews, it's not referring to the Jewish people in general. It's referring to the Jewish authorities, the Jewish religious leaders, if you will. Does that make sense? It's not referring to just the common, average, everyday Jewish person going around doing, minding their own business. No, it's referring to the religious leaders, scribes, Pharisees, Sadducees, all these type people, the ones that have the authority over everybody else. That's who it's referring to. Most often, in the book of John. Okay? All right, well, let's go back to this. But like it says, his brothers want him to go up to the Feast of Tabernacles. And he says, no, my time's not yet come, blah, 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 blah. And his brothers leave, and then he goes anyway. But he goes in secret, I think is how it says it. It's because he didn't want anyone to know that he was going. And I'm going to assume it's because the people want to kill him. And he's going to go, and he doesn't want nobody to know he's there. And then what ensues is what we're going to read. Okay, so let's go back to this. See, like I said, now the Jews' Feast Tabernacle was at hand. His brethren therefore said unto him, depart hence and go into Judea, that thy disciples also may see thy works that thou doest. For there is no man that doeth anything in secret, and he himself seeketh to be known openly. If thou do these things, show thyself to the world. I'm going to just go ahead and read this. He says, then Yeshua said unto them, for neither did his brethren believe him. Then Yeshua said unto them, my time is not yet come, but your time is always ready. The world cannot hate you, but it hateth me, because I testify of it, and the works thereof are evil. Go ye up unto this feast. I go not up yet unto the feast, for my time is not yet fully come. Right? But then he ends up going up anyway. He says, when he had said these words unto them, he abode still in Galilee, meaning he stayed in Galilee. But when his brethren were gone up, then went he also up unto the feast, not openly, but as it were in secret. Like I said, he made everybody think he wasn't going, and then when everybody else left, then he decides to go. Or he probably already decided to go. He just wanted everybody to think he wasn't going. Okay, and then verse 11, it says, then the Jews sought him at the feast and said, where is he? And there was much murmuring among the people concerning him. For some said, he is a good man. Others said, nay, but he deceiveth the people. Okay, I want to point out something. Like I said, just so we see this. Like I said, most often when that term Jew is used in the book of John, it's referring to the religious leaders, not the common average person. And we can see it right here. Look at verse 11. It says, then the Jews sought him at the feast and said, where is he? And then right here, it doesn't use the term Jew. It describes the common average people a different way. It says, and there was much murmuring among the people concerning him. You see how the term Jew is used for one group and the people is used for another group. Like I said, the term Jew is often used for the religious leaders in the book of John. And here it just refers to the common average people as the people. Do we see this distinction there? I'm just pointing that out because a lot of people, they don't realize that when it says Jews in the book of John, they think, it means the Jews. No, it means the religious leaders of the Jews. And it's often, the common people are often labeled a different way. Now, that's not a rule set in concrete, because there are places where it says Jews, and it's referring to All of them, all the people, whether it be religious leaders or common folks, it doesn't matter. But most often it's referring to those religious leaders. But here, in this context, the Jews are the religious leaders. Okay? That's who we're talking about here. All right, let's go back to this. Verse 12 again, I read this again. And there was much murmuring among the people concerning him. For some said, he, meaning Messiah, Yeshua, he is a good man. Others say, nay, but he deceiveth the people. Verse 13, howbeit no man spake openly of him for fear of the Jews. Again, you see how Jews is referring to something other than the common man used in the beginning of this verse. Howbeit no man, that would be the common person, spake openly of him for fear of the religious leaders of the Jews. Do we catch that? Do we see how there's a difference there? It's all in the text when you got the discernment to read it and see it. But anyway, verse 14 it says, now about the midst of the feast, Jesus went up into the temple and taught. So he went up there to teach. Now let's pay very careful attention to these next two verses. And I think this right here answers the question of whether Jesus was a Pharisee or not. This is right here. And the Jews. Now who do we say this referred to? In context, so far, we've seen twice that word Jew is referring to someone other than the common average person. And like I said, most often it's referring to the religious leaders of the Jewish people. So, with that in mind, that's who this is referring to. And the Jewish religious leaders marveled, saying, how knoweth this man letters, having never learned? Let's read that one more time. And the Jewish religious leaders marveled, saying, how knoweth this man letters, having never learned? Okay. Now, it says, how does this, basically what they're asking is, how does this man, meaning Messiah, how does this man know letters? Yeah, first off, you have to understand what that means. How does he know letters, having never learned? Okay. That word letters, the way it's used in the New Testament can mean has quite a few meanings. Here, we'll pull this up. Here, let me transition back, and I'll pull this up just so you can see what I'm talking about. Verse 7:15. Let me get back down to it. It's right there above my mouse, if you can see it. It's Strong's number G1121. Now, let me click on this. I will go up here to the dictionary and we're just going to read it and see what it says. Come on, here we go. Grammar. That'd be where we get our English word grammar from. But you see how it says a writing, that is a letter, a note, epistle, book, etc. Plural learning, bill, learning, letter, scripture, writing, written. All right, you see, it just means a writing of any kind in general. It can refer to scriptures. It can refer to an epistle. It can refer to a letter. It can refer to, you see what I'm saying? It's just a very general use word. Okay, now let's go back to my face. So basically what they're asking, it doesn't really matter how it's used in context here when they say, how does this man know letters? I've heard some people refer to it and say, well, that's talking about the scriptures. Okay, perhaps it does. I've heard some people say, because he's dealing with the Jews, the religious leaders, we're just going to go with the Pharisees, that it's referring to their oral traditions. Well, if these are oral traditions, then why is it referred to writings? Because these were oral traditions of the fathers, not the writings of the fathers. You see what I'm saying? Maybe it does refer to that. Maybe it doesn't. The oral traditions of basically what it comes down to, like I said in the beginning, it's either referring to the written law of Moses, Torah proper, and or the Tanakh, the law and the prophets, those writings, or it's referring to the Pharisaical writings. But either way, it doesn't matter for the case of this. Now we know it can't be referring to in general just writings, and it can't be referring to quote unquote the epistles of the New Testament. Why? Because those haven't been written yet. So in proper context, it can't refer to those. It can only be referring to either the Tanakh or the stuff of the Pharisees, right? But then they say he has never learned. How knoweth this man letters, having never learned? So the letters is not what that refers to has no bearing on the second part. He's never learned. And now who asked this? These are the religious leaders, the scribes, Pharisees, however you want to say it, right? But it says that he's never learned. So what does that mean in cultural and historical context? The religious leaders of the day are saying that Jesus has had no formal education, whether it be about the written Torah or the oral Torah. Do you see what I'm saying? It doesn't matter what it's referring to, but he's never had any formal education. And what was the education of the time period? Two schools of thought, the house of Hillel and the house of Shammai. And the Jewish people say that, the Jewish religious leaders say that he's never learned. He has no formal education. He's never been to any of these schools. So that right there just kind of make Yeshua not a Pharisee. If he's never had the formal training to be a Pharisee, then how can he be labeled as a Pharisee? Does that make sense? That's the way I see it. That answers this whole question. Was Jesus a Pharisee? Was Yeshua a Pharisee? Well, the text right there from the words, it says that he was not learned. Meaning he didn't have the training. So whether he was called rabbi or not, no matter what the Talmud, which that kind of negated itself because they say he was taught by someone who wasn't alive when Yeshua was. So that negates that. Like I said, all these people who say that he is a Pharisee, they all point out this stuff, and it's a very craftily presented argument. But upon examination, none of it falls apart. And then the text right here says that Yeshua never learned, meaning he never had any formal training. And what made a Pharisee? The fact that they had went to school. Beth Hillel, Beth Shammai. Yeshua never learned. So like I said, back to my original statement, I do not think Yeshua, was a Pharisee. I don't care if he was called rabbi. I don't care if the Talmud mentions him. I don't care if he seemed to teach like they taught. None of that matters. What does the text say? Like I always emphasize, what does the text say? The text says he had never learned. So, I personally say he was not a Pharisee. But if you got any other information, please, by all means, I will look at it. Share it in the comments below. But I'll be done this week. So if anybody, there's your piece of scripture that points to the fact that he wasn't a Pharisee. Makes sense? I'll leave it at that. And remember, this week I'll get, most high willing, I'll get 2 Corinthians uploaded. I'll finish the work on Job. And I'll end this one like I end every one I do. Don't just read this thing, but chew on it. Shalom, shalom, folks.